Hi! In this section, we'll now go on to the proper use of your DSLR. What I have here with me is a Canon EOS 1000D. Now, it looks bigger than your typical DSLR because it's equipped with a vertical grip, mounted with a 28-70 f2.8 constant aperture lens. This is also called the fast zooms. But regardless, the controls and functions is similar. Let's talk about the important controls of your DSLR. It's very common that a DSLR have so many controls. Let's go and have a run through of the controls of a DSLR. So we will first go to the most important part, which is the shutter. This is the main control dial. This will be very important. This is the ISO button. This is the mode dial, power switch. This is the AF selection point button. This is the aperture control button, the one with the AV. This is the white balance button. Of course, we have the menu and display buttons. Then we have this one. In this icon is the metering mode selection button. Then we have the drive mode selection button. Then we have the AF selection button. And we have the playback button, and we have the erase button. Now put in mind that the three gateways of light will be basically the backbone of a photographer's knowledge. And if you want to go further in photography, that's the first thing that you have to understand, the three gateways, which is the aperture, shutter, and ISO. Now, you will notice that your DSLR, no matter if it's a Canon or a Nikon or even Sony, that the closest controls are basically to control the three gateways. So you will notice here, this main dial is basically controlling the shutter. And of course, you have the shutter button, then you have the shutter control. Then here, you have the ISO button, and here, you have the aperture control button. And basically, you have it here, three gateways of light. Shutter, aperture, and ISO. Now let's take a sample. Okay, let's turn on the camera. I'll turn on the live view. And you can see that I have a gold cup on the table. Okay, let's focus it a little. Okay, now we have it focused. And you will notice that we have here on the screen, or on the display, we have here, this is called the metering guide. So if I take the control dial near my shutter, in Nikon, the control dial is at the back, but for Canon, it's on the front. So notice if I control the control dial, or if I turn the control dial, the main dial, you will notice that exposure changes. You know? And you will also notice that the meter goes down. So I'm going to change the shutter. This is the shutter. This indicates the shutter. Okay, you will see. I set it to 1/50, 1/40, 1/30, 125, 120, and you can see it goes a little overexposed. So what you're going to do basically is, to be able to get the right exposure, you have to zero in. See? Now the meter is guided to 0, and you get the right exposure for the cup. Now, it's not just the shutter that you're controlling, you're also controlling the aperture. Now, if you notice, the aperture is set to 4.0. And if I hold the aperture button, and if I tick the main dial, you will notice that the aperture changes value. So it can go down to 2.8 for this particular lens. So I can also go higher. And you will notice as I go higher, the shutter opening actually closes a little. So it gets a little underexposed until it gets so dark, because it's already set to 9. So again, we check the metering guide. So the ideal is 4.0. Now, I've set the aperture particularly to 4.0, where it is actually the most commonly used. It has enough depth of field, and at the same time, you can get a decent shutter speed. So, if I press the ISO button, and you will see the ISO button, and I again control the dial. I change it to 800. Immediately, the image is boosted, or the light collected is boosted. If I set it to ISO, now it's really overexposed. So, I set it to 400. Now, if I go down to 100, it's already underexposed. So, let's go to ISO 400. And, okay, let's set. Just click set. Okay, and, okay, maybe we can try to take one photo. So if we play back, you will see a properly exposed cup. Now, of course, you don't have to use the same controls or values. You can always change a little. So for example, okay, let's go back. I want to change, okay, let's go to the ISO. Let's set it to 1600. Okay. Now you will see that the exposure is already the same. Now, what if I want it ISO 1600 and I want the aperture blade to open up wide up to 2.8? Let's see. Now it's overexposed. So what I'm going to do is I need to change the shutter speed to around 320. Now you can see the difference. If you boost the ISO to a 1600 and opening the aperture value to 2.8, which is quite big, which gives you a little depth of field, a very small depth of field, you will notice that your shutter speed is very fast, and this is 1/320. So let's take a photo. Okay, let's play back. And you will see this is taken at shutter speed of 1/320 at aperture value of 2.8 and ISO of, let's see, the ISO, okay, here, ISO value of 1600. And going back, you will see here, so you will see ISO is 400 and aperture value is 4.0, and 1/40 is the shutter speed, 1/40 of a second. So you can actually do it on your own, or you can make your own settings. You'll just have to mix and match the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture. But most of the time, ISO is always set to a standard. Like when you're outdoor, you always take ISO 100 or 200 sometimes. And when you're indoor, you take ISO 400 to 800. Sometimes you may even boost your ISO speed to 1600 to get a decent shutter speed. So basically, that's the general rule in ISO. But most of the time, what photographers are controlling is actually the aperture and the shutter control.